Hello friends, this video on fiber and fabric part 1 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Topics to be covered in this lesson are fibers, fabric, natural fibers wherein we'll talk about cotton, jute, coir, synthetic fibers, fiber to fabric wherein we'll discuss about ginning, spinning, weaving and knitting. So looking at the screen, can you guess what are we going to talk about in this lesson when we say fiber to fabric? Now I'm pretty sure a lot of you would have come across the term fabric. Like when you go to buy a dress for yourself, you'd have seen your mom often ask the shopkeeper, what is the fabric of this dress? Whether it is cotton or it is polyester or it is silk. So what is it? So what is fabric? Fabric is about the material of your cloth. And what is fiber? Fiber is something of which the fabric is made up of. Now when you think of fabric, a huge variety of fabrics are available. For example, you think of the silk saris, you think of the cotton dresses, cotton shirts, cotton pants, cotton frocks. You think of the dresses which you wear in winters. For example, the sweaters, jackets, the sweatshirts. So all of them are clothes. But when you try to compare a sweater with a t-shirt, you touch the two of them, do you note a difference between the two? Do you think that both are similar? No, sweater is warmer, it is made up of like wool. So when you touch it, you can feel that it is quite different from that of cotton or from silk. Again, cotton and silk are very much different from each other. So just try out looking for different fabrics in your house. Maybe you can pick up a few saris of your mother where you can just touch and feel them. What kind of fabric is that? You can take up a few frocks or few dresses of yours to see the kind of fabric they are made up of. So basically here we will talk about the different fibers of which the fabric is made up of and how do we make fabric out of a fiber. So there are a lot of things that we will talk about. So to start with, we are basically going to talk about the clothes which we wear. What are they made up of? How are they made? So all those stuff. So when I talk about a fiber, you might say that, okay, you mean to say that a fabric is made up of a fiber. That's what I said just now. That means that if I am talking about a fabric which is maybe cotton, so that cotton fabric is made up of cotton fibers. Now, you might be curious to touch and feel a fiber. How does a fiber feel like? So what you can do is you can take up some cotton cloth. In fact, you will have a lot of waste clothes in your house maybe, or the tablecloths, and just try to observe some corner of the tablecloth where, normally how the tablecloth would be, it will be like stitched on all the four corners. But somewhere if the stitch is not there, what you can see, that some threads are coming out of it. Now, if you start pulling that thread, you can actually see that this entire cloth which you see as the tablecloth, that is actually made up of a number of threads which are like, kind of arranged in a specific pattern to form that cloth. Now, it is not only true for this tablecloth. You take up anything, maybe a dress, but just try to focus on the corners, because on the corners you will be able to find out the threads. So if you observe them very minutely, you can see that the fabric or the cotton fabric or the wool fabric or the silk fabric is actually made up of thinner threads. So when we talk about fibers, we are not only talking about those threads, we are saying that those threads are also made up of even thinner threads. So those extremely thin threads are nothing but fibers. So similarly, you can try to observe the same thing with woolen clothes. Now, when you look at a thread from of a cloth, so that thread is like the one which you pass through the hole of the needle. So you would have seen that how thin a needle is and how tiny the hole of the needle is. So when you want to pass the thread through the hole of the needle, it takes in a lot of effort. It doesn't happen very easily, right? Because the thread is very thin. Now this thread in turn is made up of even thinner filaments or even thinner thread-like structures. So those thinner thread-like structures are the fibers. So basically fibers form these kind of threads, and these kind of threads all together form the fabric. So let's look at a woolen sweater. Maybe you can pick up any sweater or a scarf or anything which is made up of wool. Now try to observe it very closely. You will see that it is made up of wool. So you can see the threads of wool, which would be thicker when compared to the cotton threads. But even if you try to observe one single wool, like one single strand of wool, you will see that this in turn is made up of many thinner thread-like structures. So these thinner thread-like structures are nothing but the fibers. So when you actually do this yourself, you will be able to get more convinced that yes, fabrics are made up of fibers. So what is a fiber? So fibers are very, very thin strands of thread or filament which forms constituent for various composite materials. So when I say composite materials, it could be cotton, it could be rayon, it could be nylon, it could be silk, it could be wool. So because there are different types of fabric which are available. Now those fabric, they are made up of some constituent materials, which is mostly the threads, for example the cotton threads or the wool, which we see the woolen strands, and those constituents are made up of fibers. So fibers are like extremely thin. Now different fabrics are used for different purposes. For example, wool is primarily used for making sweaters. Again, you look at cotton, they are useful for making dresses. You look at something which is more coarse and rough, they are used to make things like carpet or mattresses. So different fibers based on their properties will have different uses. Now when we talk about fiber and fabric, so what are we basically going to discuss? We are going to discuss how these fibers are assembled together to form a fabric, because when we talk about a fabric, it is basically this. So if we are talking about this sweater, so the woolen sweater, so the fabric of the sweater is wool, and this woolen sweater is being, how do you make this sweater from this yarn of wool? Have you ever seen your granny or your mother making a sweater for you? If not, just ask them that if I give you some yarns of wool, some balls of wools, would you be able to make a sweater for me? And they would say yes. So they basically knit the sweater. So that's how the entire fabric is being made. And how is this wool, how do you get these wool balls? So they are formed from, they are even made up of, each strand of wool is made up of even thinner strands of thread-like structures, and these are called fibers. So in this lesson we will see that how such thinner fibers are organized together to form these threads, like these yarns, and how these yarns are further used to make a fabric. So this is not only true for wool, but is also true for other fabric like silk. So here you see, this is the silk fabric. This is how the entire fabric look like. Now this fabric later can be used to make to stitch. You can get a frock stitched out of this silk fabric. You can get a shirt stitched out of this fabric. You can get a silk sari. Now you can have many different types of clothes as per your choice. But how did you get this silk fabric? From the silk threads. And what if you look at a single thread? So each single thread is made up of many more thread-like structures, thinner thread-like structures. So these thinner thread-like structures are the silk fibers. So what are the steps that are involved in order to get a silk fabric from a silk fiber? So these silk fibers had to be grouped together to form the silk threads, and then the silk threads are like rolled into these kind of balls, because they need to be kept in an organized way. Otherwise what will happen? They'll get tangled to each other and you will not be able to get the silk fabric. So basically from here to here, and then from these silk yarns you actually get the silk fabric. So we will look at the process, that how this happens. How do we get fabric from fiber? Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more educational videos with a better experience. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for latest updates. Thank you once again.